Oh, was she? Yeah.
And we are live.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah, we got to go Saturday. We couldn't go Sunday. Oh, I know. Way more people. Well, yeah. Golf carts that take people around. I saw you. Remember I was pulling out and showing you how to play?
I know, you did, right? It's 6-gallon bucket. I know, right? She loves it. Oh my gosh. Well, I just have to do that for fun. Thank you. You got any good golf in? Nice weather?
I surgery on this side.
Okay, how'd it go?
So that screwed me up 2 weeks ago, but then last week, this week I get this one. So
Is this one, is there any blurriness afterwards?
it's not as early as the other. Oh, you mean?
No,
Yeah,
is
there
there like
is. One day and a half. Yeah, a day and a half.
where you kind of are like,
Yeah. And then you get to worry about it.
yeah, you know, where you think like, oh no, what happened? And then you come out of the fog, I guess, and
Yeah.
that's amazing. Is it just a lot of eye drops you have to do?
Yes. It's terrible.
How long, so I guess the recovery is done.
Actually, the recovery is 3 or 4 days. But you have to wear sunglasses for almost 2 weeks because the brightness is
It's almost like getting your eyes dilated or something.
sort of, yeah. Sort of.
That's interesting. Good luck for the
Yeah, yeah.
upcoming closing eye.
It's all good. So we are on that. We're on YouTube.
Different vibe.
Call the meeting to order. This is the monthly meeting of the City Council of the City of Prospect, Kentucky. Today is July 19th, 2021 at 7 p.m. All members of the council are present except for Don Gibson. So we do have a quorum. We have 5. Also the city attorney and the city clerk. And the chief of police. First order of business on our agenda is seeking approval actually of the minutes of 2 meetings, the regular council meeting on June 21st, the special council meeting on June 29th. Couple of those 2 together and ask if anyone has any suggested corrections or additions. I move that we approve them. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll come to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, and those minutes are approved. Next agenda item is the mayor's update on city matters. First, I want to mention that we had a really nice farewell gathering for Laura on her last day, June 30th. I drove over to St. Matthews and got her a cake from Heisman's Bakery. Everybody at City Hall, including many of the police officers, were there. Had some of the cake. We right down to the last piece. We finished the cake. Just enough. Everybody signed her card. Chief Sherrard and I both gave her personal presents. Not going to say what they were. We paid for them ourselves. And it was hard to say goodbye. Having said that, I want to also say that I'm very happy that I nominated this council approved, making John Carter our city clerk. He was a good choice. Next, the 4th of July celebration was a big success. I've had many emails saying so, and I think so. We had the parade, the children got prizes, the big band was great. Fireworks, in my opinion, were the best ever, which is really saying a lot. Next, Mark Madison of Milestone, our paving engineers and consultant, he was here last week to meet with us on site and go over the recommendations and cost estimates they are about to make to us in writing regarding redoing the City Hall parking lot. He showed us why the parking lot will need a lot of work, especially around the perimeter, where he recommends retaining walls to keep the asphalt breaking away as it has been. It also appears from conversation that it will cost more than the $35,000 that we budgeted, so we'll see. Also, Mark has put our road paving out for bids last Wednesday. This was at his suggestion to see what we get. If we don't like any of the bids, we can reject them all and try again in the spring. Next, our audit for the most recent year is expected to begin in August. Strathman and Company has been very reliable. They did the last audit, picked it up late in record time. Next, we have received the report about Putney Pond. Lee Droppelman made an oral report to the Parks Committee about a week ago and answered questions. And in a few minutes, Linda Wardell, the chair of the Parks Committee, will summarize his report for us. Next, LDG litigation continues as to both Prospect Cove and the Viridian. LDG's motion to the court to reconsider its prior decision, this is on Prospect Cove, is still pending. Up the road at the Viridian, the circuit court dismissed the lawsuit, which alleged that the property had never been properly rezoned. That dismissal has now been challenged in that circuit court. It kind of looks to me that this is probably going to end up on appeal, no matter which way it goes. Appeal takes up to 2.5. I believe our finances are in good shape. We end the 2021 fiscal year with a surplus of $678,000 and change. The 21-22 budget appropriates $585,700 of that, which results in a net increase in our reserves of $92,678. Finally, our US 42 safety study is moving along towards doing an RFP, request for proposals. The engineering company that will do the study. I will let Herb Schulhafer talk about that in a few minutes. Questions?
Yeah, John.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Are we going out for the asphalt with the fiber, the aramid fibers, as we did with the most recent paving, or are we just not looking at that?
I think we will look at that.
That's part of the technical spec that we went out with.
I have to talk to Mark about how we do that. But I would intend to use the fiber as a last.
Right. I think that's a good idea. I just was curious.
Yeah. And talking to Mark about whether common wisdom, what I've heard is that you are better off waiting in the spring because the pavers are hungrier for business. Mark said, yeah, but never know until you actually put it out and see what you get. He said it doesn't cost that much to put it out there and see. And if you like what you get, you can go, and if you don't like what you get, you not go, and then spring. So that's what he recommended.
So would they pave before spring?
Oh, yeah,
Said within 60 days, I think, is that what he said, of the selection?
it would be
He
this
said
year.
at the next council meeting, we would have his bid proposal packet, kind of like he did before, hey, these are the bidders. And then he'd also have the full estimates for this parking lot and this expansion.
Okay, in regard to this parking lot, we were not only just looking at paving, we were talking about
Correct.
reconfiguration. Have
It's a
we
good
seen
deal,
He has
it's
that.
a good deal
Yeah.
more, it's a good deal more than just paving.
Have,
Yeah.
have we seen a plan though? How many more spaces do we get?
Figure to give you a written proposal, which we don't have.
It wasn't the proposal, it was,
He did a walkthrough. I happened to be here for it. That's the only reason I was mentioning this. And Mark walked the grounds, and there were some decision points that kind of the mayor had to make of what our intent for money spent to make sure.
okay,
how-
for example, one of them was they were going to look at slanting. the
Correct, that's all
stripes.
included that. So he did the walkthrough, and in the walkthrough, they talked about, hey, to bring it up to code, your handicap spots, you're at this grade, you gotta come to this grade. We can fix that via asphalt. Walked around the edge, hey, you've gotta go 2 extra feet, actually on that part of the parking lot. This one, the retaining wall on the back side, that L shape actually will end up being a pleated square the other way, in the back by where Ron
Parks
put
his
his
trucks.
trailer, correct,
Okay.
because of the way the water flows. And then another 12 feet or so out on this side. And then he said we'd gain probably 4 spots, sir, I think it was, 4 spots along this back side, just from the way it would be reconfigured. And then that addition, and then he walked through where that would go, how that was. So I think there were a couple of decision points that the mayor had to comment on to go, yeah, we want it to fix it correctly. And then he goes, okay, I'll run all that, and then you'll get the full picture, price, everything.
Committee reports, parks. Linda Wardell.
Good evening, and as I mentioned to Sandra before the meeting, it's so good to be here in person for the first time in over a year. As the mayor mentioned earlier, we had a special meeting on 23rd to discuss the Putney Pond feasibility study report with Lee Droppelman, who's the project leader. And in addition to committee members, several citizens and some council members and the mayor were all in attendance. And Lee was able to answer questions and explain the pros and cons of the various options. And some of the council had the report, some didn't. I think everyone now has a copy of the report, also the meeting minutes from this special meeting. So we can talk about the report, but I think it would probably be better for everyone to look at it. Later in this report, I'll talk about our most recent Parks Committee meeting and sort of where the committee members are in terms of what we do right now and what kind of things are going to consider to be studied and maybe make some plans in the future. So I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I wanted to mention that we did have some remaining budget funds in fiscal year 2021, and we were able to engage ICF for additional invasive plant removal in Harrods Creek Park. And we were also able to engage Earthground Landscape to complete the Orange Trail stabilization. That was adding gravel and portions that were washing out. And they also did some parking lot repair in Harrods Creek Park. And this is, the most recent flood this spring washed out some riprap and is kind of undermining part of the parking lot. And we knew that Earthbound was going to have equipment on site. They were ordering gravel, and it was just the most economical way to make those repairs happen. So I'm glad to report that all of that was able to be done before June 30th and within budget of fiscal year 2021. So that's great. I also want to talk a little bit about the July 4th celebration. It was wonderful. My grandchildren, for the first time, watched fireworks live, and they were blown away. It was great. But members of the Park Committee and also the Forestation Board distributed parks brochures, bird brochures, and tree brochures. And we received a lot of positive comments about the brochures. Not a lot of people came to our table, but certain members of the committees went out and distributed the brochures, and that was a real plus. And they have more to say about this, but there were several people that indicated they were very excited about the tree program. So that's good. Now that we have a 2022 budget established, I'm in the process of meeting with various contractors to get formal proposals for plant removal, continued plant removal, concrete path work in Harrods Creek Park, and also an engineering study to replace deteriorating culvert in Harrods Creek Park with a bridge. So that's all in progress. Our committee met last week on July 12th, and a lot of the meeting focused on discussing the options regarding Putney. In addition to committee members, there were some council members present, and also residents living on Putney Lane were able to give their comments. So that was very helpful, and we're very happy to have them included in that conversation. The consensus of the committee is that as our first step this year, we should begin invasive plant removal. This will open up vistas to the pond and also protect native plant populations. We will continue to evaluate other options. As you read the report, you will see that some of them are quite expensive. We're not going to take any action, or don't recommend taking any action at this time to accelerate the transition to a wetland. That is one of the options that was mentioned. However, there is an interest in pursuing what was termed the low-cost option. This would involve strategically placing logs at the edge of the pond in areas where there's greater flow. And the concept is that it will create what they call scour pools, which retain deep levels of water on one side of those logs, which would to support fish populations and make it possible to continue fishing, which some of our residents enjoy. At some point, we may also want to plant specific native vegetation that will support a wider variety of plant life or wildlife. Without action, the pond will probably be taken. Which are native, very aggressive, very difficult to get rid of. And we might at some point to create a little more diversity wetland as it transitions. And as we're looking at that in the future, right now we don't need to make hard decisions, but as we look at what do we really want this transition to be, how do we want to plan for these options? I envision that we would also pursue grant opportunities to help fund, because a lot of this is pretty costly. So for this year, we have some budget to move invasive plants around the pond. That's our first step. Making plans in the future to figure out what the next step is going to be. Finally, we're once again starting to plan events in the parks, and there was some discussion about hosting bird walks, especially during migration times, spring wildflower walks, which are always very common, and the Harrods Creek Trail Bash, which normally takes place in November. It was also suggested that spend a little more time and effort taking a look at programming for young. And actually, one of our offices has a contact that's interested in this, come up with activities for younger children, crafts or walks or something. So we're just starting to get a handle. So that's my report. Sure.
You mentioned the culvert that you're looking at.
Yes.
Is it main thing there by that little waterfall?
That's exactly it.
Isn't that the responsibility of the
Actually, the water company, when they finished the force main sewer line, they were supposed to take it out. Now, we want to get our equipment across that stream to mow. And we actually made an application with, I'm not sure who granted it, I'm sure Army Corps of Engineers was involved and maybe someone else. But we applied to keep that culvert. MSD would have removed it and returned the stream. So at this point, it is our responsibility. And it is deteriorating. I mean, it's not going to fall apart tomorrow, but we think that we need to be looking at replacing that with a bridge, which would be much more aesthetically pleasing. See what. Yes.
Linda, I think it would be a good idea to tell everybody about, in the Droppelman report, proposition number 1, which is the invasives and the dropping a few logs into the pond, and that's it, and how much that costs. And then talking about proposition number 2, which is to notch the dam so that you can drain the pond and create a wetlands faster, and how much that's going to cost. I'd like to hear about those two and the figures if you have them.
They're in the report.
I will, absolutely.
So
Because I think the council will be, shall I use the word impressed, by how fast the cost escalates beyond proposal number 1.
right.
When you get to proposal number 4, we're in the millions of dollars.
Exactly.
So anyway, we won't go into that. But 1 and 2, I think you might want to.
Sure. So the low-cost habitat enhancement would, as the mayor mentioned, 2 or 3 logs in strategic locations to create those scour pools and retain some deep water areas. And this is all conceptual level budgeting, but the estimate is between $10,000 and $20,000. So then you look at the medium cost conversion to stream and wetland complex. This would actually create a notch in the dam, which would lower the level of Putney Pond. And the reason to consider doing this is that right now, if we do nothing, eventually it will transition to a wetland. But with the weather and periodic flooding of the Ohio River and, just weather events, that level of the pond is going to go up and down. Right now, in the middle of summer, we have some mud flats in the middle of the pond. Then we get a heavy rain event. Everything gets washed away. The pond level goes up. Maybe the dam is overtopped. The Ohio River backs up. And then it drains again. The problem with that is that you can't plant desired vegetation that might be more desirable because it's going to get washed away. So you plant stuff and then you get a heavy rain event and it's washed away.
Are we talking about planting around the edges? Or planting in the
Well,
middle?
the concept is if we know that this is going to revert to a wetland at some point, if we lower the level of the pond, that gives us the opportunity to actually plant desirable vegetation.
Would we
that will
retain
support-
any wet areas?
Oh, yes, it's
Okay.
still going to be wetland. What all of the experts we have told us is that wetlands actually support more wildlife than wetlands, which was news to me.
One of my concerns is the bald eagles feed from the fish in there. Will we
Right.
retain some ability for that to continue?
If we have those scour pools, some of those would be retained, so that would. There's also the opportunity to put some kind of a gate. You notch the dam, so you lower it, but you could also put, in essence, a floodgate. And at certain times of the year, you might want to raise the level. But it wouldn't be subject to these water events that it all drains out, then it fills up, then it drains out. The other, it sometimes seems a little counterintuitive, but the other thing that Lee mentioned is that if the typical level of the pond is lowered, when you do have the Ohio River backing up or a heavy rain, you're starting from a lower level and you still have the ability for that area to retain water. So it does seem a little counterintuitive, but that is also true. Now, to do that, medium cost would be $50,000 to $100,000. So that's, pretty pricey. Now, the next option is to really engineer the course of the stream. So it's little Honey Creek stream, right? Little Honey Creek. You could actually create a channel and let the rest of it revert to wetland. And that's even more costly. And again, you're kind of channeling the stream, so you're deciding where that stream's going to go. You could create deeper areas. The rest of the land would be wetlands, and you could plant it with vegetation that enhance wildlife support. Now we're talking maybe $250,000. So that gets pretty pricey. Now, we could say we're going to dredge the pond and keep it as a pond.
How do you know? That one has always been way over $1 million.
Exactly.
Yes.
And they're saying $1 million to $2 million plus, probably $10,000 to $25,000 a year to me, because it's going to keep silting in. It basically development upstream that is creating.
That was part of my question. Obviously, this takes drainage from a significant area.
It does.
Why does MSD have no involvement in this at all? And that isn't really my question. My question is that MSD there are very few things that cities like this can spend their COVID money. One of them is enhancement in regard to drainage and that type of infrastructure. MSD has gone out and been trying to recruit small cities to work with them on projects that they both would like to accomplish. In other words, they would help us and it would be our money, or at least some of our money. And the few presentations I've heard on that sound like they're worth exploring. The only bad thing is MSD's reputation.
Well, I met with MSD, I think Sarah was there, and I think Ron, so, and this was at the very beginning of COVID shutdown.
Yeah,
We
no,
were all wearing
this is
masks
within
when
the
we
last
left.
3 months.
Exactly. And at that time, they pretty much said, you can do anything with this pond you want. Is what you can do for it."
Exactly.
So it would be worth having another conversation with them, because there is this additional funding that could be available. So I appreciate that comment. Maybe probably is worth a conversation with Steve.
That could be something the city looks at, because it's under the stormwater. It's, there's
Right,
wetland,
exactly.
there's wetland restoration,
Right.
creation, mitigation. That brings to me Putney Pond,
I-
especially so, and that way we didn't have to foot the whole thing if they were talking about, hey, we'll meet you halfway, give us some of your
and
money.
even if
But
we
either
did-
way, it's our
even
money.
if we did have to put it, it's with money that we probably wouldn't be able to
Correct.
spend
Yeah.
legally
Right.
at this point in time anyway else.
So I appreciate that. Absolutely something we need to explore.
I think at the end of the meeting, we'll talk a little bit about it to figure out. I got a couple of minutes written down.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I sat through the problem and presentation and the price tag associated with each proposal. And to me, it doesn't make sense to spend money to make the pond silt up quicker. It's going to happen all by itself eventually. So why should we spend $50,000 to $100,000 to make it happen faster? It makes sense to me. All right, thank you, Linda. Fire Station Board, Mr. Tucci.
This will be a much shorter report. Linda's a hard act to follow, huh? That's a great job. Mainly, forestation board in July is concerned with a large number of dead or declining trees. I said in my report, 18 dead or declining. At least 6 of these are on city property, and we probably don't know about a lot of dead or declining trees that are scattered around the city. It's a combination of aging, disease, and the last 4. We're looking at one property in Sutherland, which has 4 dead ash trees in the front yard. And one that's very large. And when the ash tree dies, Andrea says, it becomes very hazardous. The limbs are going to fall off. And the tree cutting or tree climbing people don't even want to climb up on the trees. So we're notifying that property through code enforcement that they can take out these trees right now.
Where is that property?
That property is at 7105 Wyndham. And I was going to say the good news is that the city trees are relatively small and then on an established. It's not a big those. And the next thing we're doing, we're also working on the details for the fall canopy tree program, how to inform the residents, how to help them select the right location for canopy tree and put out the publicity through some other means when ready. But those trees are going in the late fall, probably November. Finally, we're having, this is almost a first for the Forest Station Board. We're actually going to go out and prune some trees this Friday, some small trees. This is at the urging of Andy, who thinks that they're shaped properly, that do better. Any questions?
Thanks, Lee.
On these dead trees.
Yeah.
on private property.
Yeah.
But what's the instruction to the
Well,
that not only that principle apply to the Sutherland trees, cut them down to a point
somebody could do that.
no longer hazardous. I mean, it wouldn't look good. I'm not saying it would look good, but
Well, they could do that. They could. Or shoot. Probably back and
it would make
Keep
it
it nice.
very
somewhat of a loss in the car. There is a provision.
I will say a thank you, Lee. Oh, you can go ahead, sorry, but I was just saying a thank you to you guys. I was at the, listening to the Forest Station meeting and it kind of, I was like, well, 4 trees, I know how much it is to remove 1 tree and, and I'm just a spectator listening, but you all probably spent 15 minutes talking about that and what do you really have to remove? Can you leave other things? Like what's the minimum to remove a hazard? So it was a good discussion that I think you guys had on, it's a lot of money for somebody to remove something like that and for, yeah, you all had a real thoughtful opinion on it. So that was, for me, it was nice to hear. So just to share with everybody, it's a thoughtful feedback.
But again, we're only worried about trees that are that are hazardous to city things. We don't go into people's backyards and get concerned there.
As a large
Backyard. Well, I'm going to drive by on the way home and check it out. No, thank you. You folks do a good job.
If you want to, any kind of report about them.
The library is back open 5 days a week, and it looks like our book sale will be the 3rd weekend in September. That is not a firm date yet because we're checking some other things that are coming up at that time. But everybody who decided to give us their opinion on when we should have it said, don't do it this summer. So we're not. But as soon after the summer's over, we will.
Do you need extra volunteers to help with that?
We have a lot of volunteers, but we'll portion the work.
Oh, yeah, no, I was like, get out in the newsletter. I think
No.
by mentioning I did just volunteer myself, but.
Yeah, you did. No, we have a lot of people that are many scores. And they're all expressing their opinion on when we should have the sale, so I'm assuming they're still in work.
Good, thanks. Herb? This is the US 42 safety study update.
Last month, I was here and I said I got some good news. And today I'm here to report that we got great news. This is a letter from Transportation Cabinet Secretary Jim Gray that says we're a go. And the next step on the go was to create a request for proposals for the consulting firm that will be our consultant. And Al Bensfield, who's a member of the working group, who is a retired civil engineer, he worked real close. I could pull this, the draft together to work with the Transportation Cabinet. So the request for proposal is approved. The date that advertised is approved. That is July the 29th. And by federal regulations, the request will stay posted for 21 days. And so on Thursday, August the 19th, the firms that are interested, I will tell you to even submit, you have to be qualified by the Transportation Cabinet. But that's open to over 400 firms. So it's not restrictive. It's just firms that really have the qualifications. So from that time on, then the selection committee, the working group has a 6-person working committee. And basically about 5 weeks after that, we'll hone into who we think is the best. And then there's a negotiation period. And shortly after that, we're going to be having our consultant on board. The whole timetable is we should have the study this time next year. So, any questions? Okay, I think
No, thank you for your perseverance. I know it's been a long trip for you and for Greg to get to where you are now.
well, it's kept me off the street, and I'm on my way to Dairy Queen to get my wife a visit.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you, Herb. Police report.
Mhm.
Okay, the first thing I will report on was the swim meet up at the country club over the weekend. It was for 4 days. The first couple of days, unless you were actually at the club, you probably didn't realize anything was going on, just the diving portion of it. But boy, do those kids love to swim, because when Saturday kicked in, there were 3,000 people there. And Sunday was way more crowded, which I would have never guessed, that we had people parking everywhere. And we had a pretty good plan set up for the parking, and the club was fantastic to work. We were meeting with them probably maybe 6 weeks in advance, had conversations with them. They had a really good plan set up for dropping people off, much better than what we had 8 years ago. We actually dropped them off right there on Hunting Creek Drive at the park crossing. And you wouldn't think that that would be a good spot, but it turned out to be perfect, because we could separate that lane with cones and actually run people through to get where they needed to go, and have a lane set aside to actually get people out of their vans. And that worked perfect. And nobody drove alone. It was very organized, and we had police there the entire time for all 4 events. And we made sure that at that location, we actually had police officers directing traffic there to make that much safer for everybody involved. And but on Saturday, we actually were parking cars on the street from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. That's when it ended. And yesterday, it wasn't as bad. But if there were 3,000 people on Saturday, I guarantee you there were at least 3,500 for the 5 hours yesterday. Between actually ran long, went to 6:30. But just to give you an idea where we park cars, we use the entire length of Westover, and we were over into the estate section there. We used Grenoble Drive from end to end. We were on Gunston. We used the length of Deep Creek on beyond Foxcroft, the entire length of Foxcroft going back. I utilized Riding Ridge, all the other side streets, but the only spot where we actually used both sides of the road was Westover, because that's the only street that can accommodate both sides and still have fire trucks go back and forth. And then they were able to bring everybody back and forth with golf carts, these 6-person golf carts. And they had at least 6 of those and 4 of the 4-person carts. And when that event ended at 6:30, by 7 o'clock, the streets were completely clear. That's how fast they got 3,500 people out of there. So it was a pretty remarkable event, and I'm pretty proud of it. We got tremendous feedback the entire time on both dates, that all these people from the other 7 clubs that were there were just complimenting everybody in Prospect and in Harris Creek, the country club in particular, on how well it was run. They'd never been anywhere that was that accommodating in terms of the traffic portion to get people back and forth from their cars. And as soon as they came out of the club, nobody waited longer than a minute or 2 for a shuttle. I mean, it was just, it was very well done. And then we also monitored at the end of the day, the traffic light at 42. And you never had to wait more than 1 cycle. When you got to the bottom, the amazing part about that light is if you continue to have cars come down, that light will actually hold. If you've got 5 cars, it'll basically change after 5 cars. But if you've got 25 cars, it'll go up. It will continue to hold green for Hunting Creek. It's actually a marveling genius for the guy that actually set that up. So my compliments to the guy at Metro Light Department for the way he established that, because we never had to wait twice for that light all day. Also, on the 4th of July, from our standpoint, it went very well. This is the first time in the 10 years I've been here that we only used our personnel. We didn't use the sheriff's department or anybody else. And I thought that it went great. There was a lot more accountability from our folks. And I thought it felt a lot more natural, and thought that the way that we cycled people through, I thought it just worked a lot better. So I would like to continue to do that at least while we can. Let's see, finally, after COVID, I wouldn't say that it's over, obviously it's coming back, but at least they've relaxed the standards in terms of our training. So police training is back meeting in person. After all last year, we didn't train at all except online stuff. So far, we've had 12 of us, 5 have already been through training. So once they got it going, they're going pretty quick. In fact, we had 2 that went last week. And another nice thing is they've reopened Shelby campus. That was open for years and years for in-service training for law enforcement. But 2 years ago, they shut it down. Whoever was running it thought that they didn't need another Louisville location because Louisville has their own police academy and stuff like that. They wanted to do more out in the state. But what they do is they cripple departments like ours and Jefferson County Sheriff and some of the other ones and force you to go out. And that was rough on us for a year or so. But finally, they reopened Shelby campus and they refurbished it. And Mike Thomas went last week and he said the facilities are fantastic and it's all state-of-the-art technology in it. And so that's really nice. And it was set up actually where each person has their own desk and there's a lot of distancing involved in it. And it accommodates 50 people. The other classroom only have 35. So that'll be good for us. For the activity, you can tell people are moving again because the house watches are double from what they were last year during the pandemic.
Is there a written report? I don't seem to have one.
I didn't get one either. Oh, okay. Wow. Frank, I just show up on Monday night, buddy.
That's all right, you can summarize it.
Okay. But the, like I said, the house watches doubled from same period last year during COVID. We're pretty good on the reports again. They continue to stay down for a couple months, which is good. We only had one of the unemployment fraud reports for the month. Good. They've started to really trickle off. We had one theft from a car where they actually broke a window out, which is for us is pretty rare. That happened at the club while somebody was swimming. They broke out a window and stole a purse. Let's see, there was one.
That during the swim meet?
No, that wasn't this. That was actually early in the month. That was on June 15th. Let's see. We had one prescription fraud related case. It turned out somebody picked up a lady's prescription and it was an ex-boyfriend and knew she got a Suboxone, which is usually for heroin junkies. So the ex-boyfriend knew that we had a heroin junkie living here and gave his name and gave her name. The pharmacist gave it, which is not the brightest thing, but then she admitted that he had picked it up for her in the past. So probably was on the list. Other net accident reports were more than last year, but still not outrageous. Guess that's about it.
Thanks, Steve.
I'm glad my sunscreen worked, otherwise I'd have been burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, you guys were out there for a long time. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Ruben, unfinished business. What's this, a new business, which is 6/11/2020, 6/12/2020. So the first of those, 6/11/2021, that's the fiscal year cleanup to bring the budget ordinance for that year into harmony with what actually happened. And that's what that is. Now, everybody has it in front of him. Her question is, do you first reading?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All
We're not
opposed?
voting on the thing for first reading.
That's correct. All opposed? Guys have it. Mr. Franzen, would you like to first reading, please?
The prospect ordinance 6/11/2020. General fund and new prospect fiscal year beginning by 1/2020 and 21.
Thank you. And that concludes that. Move on to 6/12/2021, which relates to the municipal road aid fund budget. I'd like to move for a first reading of that.
Is what this is doing is showing that we got more money than we anticipated? Is that what it is?
Is that- Yeah, that's what that shows.
So the additional money is actually available for paving this year, is that correct?
Is available, that amount is available today. And the road aid budget increases roughly $7,000 to $7,500 per month. So by the end of this year, it should go up another $50,000.
which we've already anticipated. Or 2 months ago, actually. Okay, I have one other question, and that is, when we're looking at the first ordinance, the previous year's appropriation, the line above that, it says other. That other, is that the COVID money, the several different waves of COVID money that we got?
I believe so.
So,
Or it includes that. I don't have the detailed document in front of me, I believe. But
okay, the reason I'm
it's
asking.
mostly
is
that,
because-
it's not entirely.
So, okay, the reason I'm asking is because at least right now, a great portion of it we cannot legally spend.
This is last year's, this is the
But there
CARES
was
Act.
COVID. And we're
The
showing.
CARES money's already spent.
The CARES money is spent, it's the ARP money.
I don't think this includes
That's
our,
not what that is.
It's an ARP that came in before July 1st.
I don't believe so. I think we're supposed to get the first payment this week.
So we anticipated it. That could be. So all of this $600,000 is CARES.
Can't say that that is so, without going into some records that I don't have in front of me. I would say that it's mostly that.
These came off of the accountant's documents for 6/30, June 30th. Is that where we got these numbers?
Yeah.
Sandra, looking at my assumptions, that includes all of that other line includes all other like 12 things on that, like the utility.
franchise tax,
The franchise
well-
business, alcohol, the utility. I think that
There's a
includes,
blue million, there's a whole bunch.
yeah,
Actually, for this
I have to get
year,
my
if
computer out.
if there's no ARP money in this, then for this year, I think that works. For the year we're in, I don't think we should do that. Because some of those monies, like the franchise fees, for example, we can spend those. But the ARP money is still got major problems attached to it. And if we're gonna just do one line that puts them all together, we can cut making some.
oh, for the end of year next year, is that what you're
Well,
talking
not
about,
just
when this
even
gets
the end,
reconsolidated?
even as we're looking at it, as the documents go through every month.
The amount in the print budget. Then to revenue stream. One item only. Revenue shortfall calculated according to a formula they gave us. It's $308. But we haven't attempted to use or figure out if we can, at this point, anything else.
No, but we put in our request for it, and that's why I'm saying, I think that we do need to be aware of the issues attached to that.
Oh, yeah,
money.
of course.
What we're looking at here is budget ordinance that will true up or make consistent what happened last year.
Last year.
So you have to, I will make a motion. That would be-
Second.
Seconded, any further discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So one carried, give it a first reading.
City of Prospect, Kentucky, ordinance 12/2021, an ordinance relating to the amendment and budget of the municipal road aid fund of the city of Prospect, fiscal year beginning July 1, 2020.
Thank you. Lost my agenda. Very good. That concludes our business. It remains to hear comments from citizens. There are two people who have signed up to speak. The first is Rob Person, 78 Grit. Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Only for my own personal knowledge, I received my last Spectrum bill 30 days ago, and I noticed that there was a 10% price increase. And further looking at my bill, I noticed that the city of Prospect is the franchisee for Spectrum. My question to the council, as I plead my ignorance, is does the council have any, what the proper word I'm looking for, do they have any input as to the increase that Spectrum passes on to its respective customers, being that the city is the franchisee for Spectrum?
Okay, it's my understanding that we do not have any way to prevent that. We have the franchise, and basically, I think what you have is an increase in their fee.
That is correct.
Yeah. We don't have any way of.
The council has, the city has no input as to when and how much that increase may or may not be.
That is correct.
Okay. All right, sir.
It's not like the Public Service Commission.
Right,
We
because,
don't
you
set
know,
that capacity.
when they publish their rates, then I think there's a 60-day period that citizens have the right to come forward to voice their yays or nays according to the amount of increase. But I felt that 10% was a little bit out of line in light of the economic situation today. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the other person who signed up to speak was Sergeant Shoemaker, and he's on. Gave up.
Sir, do you mind if I pass on the notes from Don?
So,
The notes from Don on the art thing, would that be okay?
sure.
Or, I didn't know if there was something else.
You got it.
So, credit where credit is due to Don, so he, had done some digging a couple days ago. It was sent out in the KLC city limit newsletter things, and so this is for art funding for us, so this, I'll email Lee Tucci as well. And then I
Is
did
this
a
about
deep
the
dive.
ARP money?
It is.
Did he send that to every member of the council in his email?
I got it. I'll have to look, but I can forward
Frank, did you get
the KLC
They
thing.
didn't.
Yeah, I think I got it as part of the discussion. So I did the down the rabbit hole this afternoon to find all the source documents and links. So I'll send those out because I typed those up. So a couple potentially good things. It's something for someone at the city to investigate, to do these deep dives and QC, but reading it on the surface, there seems to be quite a few things to apply. So there were some updates from the guidance as of 2 or 3 days ago, basically, and then the White House put out a memo as to how they wanted certain things interpreted. So the combination of those is for the White House piece, it was about increased, basically police enforcement, gun regulations, anti-drug programs, some stuff that doesn't apply to us, but the pieces that do are potentially the increase in police hours that we approved in this past budget. It adds the 2 days a month. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn there. I think it's 2 days a month. I think that qualifies under the ARP money. And then also potentially the new hire, we had a spot open, but since we have since filled that entire salary may apply. And again, these are things to look. Yeah. Yeah, and so there's that piece, and then for another initiative that was put in there was an increase in parks, and it had originally gotten not looked at because it was for low-income areas, which we don't qualify for. But a lot of Kentucky didn't have a qualified census tract is what it was called, but a lot of Kentucky doesn't have those. And so they went back and said, hey, can you do some interpretation for this? Can it be something other than this tract? And part of it was, hey, if you can discuss that you have a population that was disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So something we do have is we do have older citizens in Prospect. We do also have some younger citizens, but in terms of COVID and the death rates and, hey, staying at home and isolation, non-communicative with your family or support group, their goal is provide services to get people outdoors and do recreation and walk and do parks in an environment that you could do in a hopefully winding down pandemic and post-pandemic time.
Sarah,
So-
think about this. None of our parks have been ever made to be accessible. Maybe we could use this money to finally do that.
100%. And that's also something that, and I know it's not to open up discussion about it, but I know Little Hunting Creek Park, some controversy there among everyone up here. But that is something that potentially, even if we didn't get the grant, that whole park would qualify for those particular funds.
If you make it
And
nice,
it would be
if you
handicap
make it nice
accessible.
for old people too.
Old and young, it would be old and young. Yeah, it would connect from the expansion. So anyways, it would, I do think there's a strong case to be made that we could also, right? So there's a strong case to be made that we would qualify for that piece. And then, what's that?
We'd have to think it through here.
Yeah, and this is why I said someone needs to, just me reading it and going, that sounds like we qualify is not enough. I'm not willing to put my name on that. And then they also had under the stormwater, the canopy tree, urban canopy tree program, which they use urban loosely as kind of any city or town. That's basically our whole forestation budget, probably with the exception of the arborist salary. I don't know if someone would have to deep dive and see if that would really qualify, but the planting of all the trees and even the new tree program should qualify with that. And then the big thing, which I found out, 45 minutes before this in my diving in the rabbit hole, was that the wetland restoration also qualifies. And so Putney Pond is transitioning to wetland, whether we do anything with it. So in terms of, it was restoration, creation, or modification was all applied. So something to think about is we've talked about the lost revenue calculations in previous meetings that, hey, whatever lost revenue, we can use that on almost anything, i.e. infrastructure or paving. Right. It's all, and that was all we thought we could have access to. Prospect's allocation, they think, is about 1.2 million. So we were never going to get up to that. So if we could look ahead and see, hey, our lost revenue is going to be X, and then to fulfill any of the rest up to that 1.2 million, because people can have differing feelings on whether we should be, whether everybody should be getting the money or not, but people are going to spend the money. That's period.
One
So
of the other things
we can
that's
do a lot of
happening-
stuff with it.
There's
point.
also been the first judge who has decided when the money came out, you could not reduce taxes. And there's already been one judge, and so it's got a long way to go, that says maybe you can. And that might be something to think about in the future also.
But I think there's a lot of programs we put in this current budget that I think big budget items that could be covered all the way
Might be
down to
able
a
to
T. So I don't know if anybody has thoughts, but I'll send,
Is there
it has the
an
links.
expiration, an application for these funds, or have we already done it?
I'll give you my knowledge and then I'll pass it over. But for the expiration, it's December of 2024. The words are you have to have it's not allocated. It's not like we have to have it put in the budget. You have to have an expectation to spend it. There's some kind of legalese, like you have to have a plan, and then it's another year or something for execution, and that may modify it.
And I understand from the law, official figure has been sent in. I can't think of the name.
I think you do it through the
Special
Department of Local
numbers and
Government.
everything.
Yeah, the DINS number, DUNS number.
But anyway, I understand that that's there and that potentially there could even be other ways than just the ones that Sarah and I did.
Yeah. So you obviously, so if you guys don't get I updated my email address with KLC because it was going to my junk mail, the newsletter things. And that's the only way. Had Don not said it, I probably would have missed it. And then I deep dived. It's a little convoluted when you go through it. You guys can go to the KLC website. It's all on there for citizens just to take a peek. You don't have to. But for us to get them and stay up to date. But I wouldn't put my name on that check. I'm just saying, I think these are things, whoever it is, to really do some deep dive. Because I think lost revenue, we can spend so much, but I think we can
What
really make
happens
it
if you
to the other
spend it
bit.
and you're wrong?
Well, there are, so you are gonna submit forms, which they haven't created yet,
And
which
they
I do
have,
find
they have
comical,
from
but,
the get-go said to say every piece of paper you're
Yeah.
going to get audited.
well, yeah, there is if you spend a certain amount, I don't know if it's,
Quarterly.
but there are
As much money
reports.
as there-
Quarterly.
Yeah, I know. So, but just think every city in America is doing this in
Yeah,
terms of,
that's
so
right.
it's not prospects, you're on your own, go forth and muck it up or do great things. It's everybody's, everybody's trying to do it. But yeah, there'll be reports, and I think, I don't envy the three of you in any way, and God bless you for doing the work you're about to do for the next 3 years.
How about a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? You guys seem to have it. Put Greg down as undecided.
This is good. That's it.